Salutations to the Truth Core, whoever and wherever you may be on the planet. I'm here today to talk about the problem with the humanities. To do that, I'm going to go directly to the takeaway, to the conclusion of what I will say. And then I will backtrack and show you how I reached that conclusion. What is the problem with the humanities today? The elimination of the humanities deprives you of an ancestral inheritance that could enrich and guide your life, and it cripples your capacity to act on your conscience. Just reflect on that statement for a moment. The consequences of the elimination of the humanities. To put it in a concrete analogy, suppose that you are heir to a fortune. You have an inheritance coming to you. And suppose also that you would spend some of that inheritance traveling around the world, driving a car, visiting many places. Now suppose someone did something to you that caused you to be unable to draw upon that inheritance. It's yours, it's due to you, you are the heir, but through some evil trickery, you are deprived of the inheritance. Therefore, you are deprived of precious resources. And additionally, suppose that the same perpetrators who do that also do something to you, whatever it might be, that cripples and handicaps you so that you can't drive a car. What is the result? You end up being unable to receive and enjoy your inheritance, and you end up being unable to function in a normal way, that is to say, to drive an automobile. I think that's a pretty strong analogy, but you may conclude at the end of this talk that it applies accurately to the problem with the humanities. To begin, let's consider a definition of the humanities. This is what Wikipedia says. Humanities are academic disciplines that study aspects of human society and culture. In the Renaissance, the term contrasted with divinity, that is theology, and referred to what is now called the classics, the main area of secular study in universities at the time. Today, the humanities are more frequently defined as any fields of study outside of professional training, mathematics, and the natural and sometimes social sciences. The humanities include the study of ancient and modern languages, literature, philosophy, history, archaeology, anthropology, law, politics, religion, and art. That's what Wikipedia says. Now this is what I say. The humanities comprises a wide range of studies and practical approaches to life, practical and moral attitudes that center on the question of what it means to be human. So the humanities are primarily concerned with investigating and questioning basic values and attitudes that determine what it is to be human, that determine the sense of humanity that we all have. I've spoken of the sense of humanity in reference to the symbiont equation. Everyone has a sense of humanity which has two modalities. One points to yourself. I have my sense of my humanity, or the humanity in myself. And the other modality points to others. I sense or detect or recognize the humanity in others. So if you can think of the sense of humanity as something that we all possess innately, then you can think of the humanities as the tools and studies to heighten that sense, to bring it into definition, and eventually to propose behavior which is consistent with a sense of humanity that has been cultivated, a cultivated sense of humanity. That's what I say the humanities are. Or to put it more correctly, that's what I say, not what I say. Now, given that is a fairly adequate provisional definition, let's go back and look at the statement that I made. There are two components in the syntax of that statement to examine, to see what the statement really implies, the total inference of that statement. First component is the elimination of the humanities. Well, that begs the question, who's eliminating the humanities? Or are they being eliminated? And why? The other syntax concerns the inheritance, the ancestral inheritance, your ancestral inheritance. But who are you? And who am I talking about here? Now, merely a brief reflection on those components of that proposition can be quite revealing. For instance, in order to receive an inheritance, usually it comes from the family. So the parents die and their children inherit from the parents. And by extension, the parents inherited from the grandparents, they inherited from their grandparents, and so you get a general concept there of ancestral inheritance. If you want to extend that concept, you can say that your immediate blood relatives are the heirs to the entire ancestral line of your race. So, for instance, I'm a hybrid, a crossbreed between Irish and Italian folk stock, racial stock. And therefore, my inheritance does not only come from my immediate blood parents and grandparents and great-grandparents, but ultimately it comes from the Italic peoples and the Irish peoples. So I receive an ancestral inheritance from that great lineage of ancestors, even though I don't know them. And in some way or other, everyone who lived and breathed and worked and loved and suffered and learned and made mistakes and was betrayed and betrayed others and rose to great achievements and suffered great failures, all of those anonymous people in the dual line of my ancestral lineage are my benefactors. So I receive what I am from them. And there is a continuing inheritance from them. I don't merely receive it at one particular moment in time, but it is always there to draw upon. So when I go to the culture of the Irish races, I draw upon my own inheritance, you see? So bear in mind that this notion of ancestral inheritance is a key to seeing what the humanities can mean to you. But once again, just asking for a friend, who are you? Well, here it comes, and maybe you can see it coming. I'll put it in the form of the question. Who are the ancestors of all the races of the world who produced the humanities? Who are they? The answer is, they are the white, Aryan, Caucasian races exclusively. No other race or civilization has produced the humanities. They are a unique inheritance from the white Caucasian races. Therefore, the humanities are racist. And you guessed it, that's one of the reasons why some people need to eliminate them. It is a simple and brutal fact of reality in the world today that to eliminate the humanities is to tear out the roots of identity, morality, and spirituality that are inherent to the white, Aryan, Caucasian races. And therefore, the elimination of the humanities can be considered as a form of intellectual genocide. Who wants to commit intellectual genocide on whites? Well, who doesn't might be a better question. Who doesn't want to commit physical genocide on whites? Look around. Look at the program. But primarily, if you look at the progression of events in the 20th century, say, it has been the cultural Marxists who set out in the early 1930s to accomplish what they called the Long March through the institutions. That is to say, to subvert and destroy and degrade educational institutions, particularly the universities, and by now all the way down to the nursery schools. And the aim of the cultural Marxists, one of their aims, was to eliminate the humanities from university curricula. And as far as I know, they have more or less done exactly that to this day. Colleges and universities today offer all kinds of degrees. Business administration is very popular. Social studies, poli-sci, political science, and many, many others. But you will find that the humanities are almost entirely absent. So much for the issue of inheritance. Let's go back to the other part of my analogy, the ability to drive a car. I said that someone does something to you, maybe they poison you in some way, or they give you an injection, who knows? And as a result, you're crippled. You can't use your arms and your legs properly. So maybe you can just barely drive a car, but you can't really do it efficiently, and you don't dare to go very far in one. The analogy says, it warns you about being crippled in a basic function that you need to live. But in the original language of my proposition, I used the word conscience. So conscience is the automobile you drive. the elimination of the humanities damages your ability to act on your conscience. It doesn't mean that you can't act on it. Conscience is a powerful element in the human psyche, but it means that you may not be able to act on it in an optimal way, in a confident, strong, courageous, and forceful way. That's what the elimination of the humanities does. That is how deeply it damages human behavior. Now, I'm not going to say much more in this talk, but I will say a little about conscience. I could talk about conscience for quite a while. There's a Greek word, synedesis. Synedesis. It's a Greek word for conscience. And as a matter of fact, surviving records from antiquity, from the pagan world of Greek and Latin literature, present the evidence of the first known use of that word. It can be found in the play Orestes, written by Euripides and performed in Athens, I think in 408 BCE. That's 2,400 years ago and change. Now, it may surprise you to know this or to learn this, and you may strongly object, but I assure you that what I say is well-founded. Previous to the definition of conscience and the discussion that ensued, which has been going on for 2,400 years, in the 5th century in Athens, human beings around the world did not possess conscience in the way that you possess it today. They did not have that faculty. Conscience is like an app that was installed at that time through Greek tragedy and Greek philosophy. Synedesis is the gift to humanity from a particular race, the Hellenic peoples of the ancient world. And that is a very great fact, and it is irrefutable. Now, of course, the first objection is that conscience is something innate to humanity, to the human animal, as I would say. Oh, is that so? Conscience is innate to the human animal. So that means that there was conscience in ancient China, and conscience all over Africa, and conscience among the Native American Indians and the Aztec and the Mayas and the Incas, and all through Siberia and out into Polynesia and every place you can imagine. There was conscience. Those human animals, those societies, those communities and nations were populated by people who had conscience. Yes, they did. But they had what is called social conscience, or socially, externally framed conscience. The concept of themos in Greek religion is an indicator of that type of conscience. But that's not the kind of conscience that you have. Now, you can apply your individual conscience to social matters, and you can take responsibility for social behavior and even for the activities of others in the society to which you belong. In doing that, you are applying synedesis to social events and situations. In the past, individuals did not have the unique, subjective, inner, reflective tool of conscience. They acted as social animals, and as such, yes, they had a form of conscience. For instance, in ancient China, in the writings of Confucius, who was also of the 5th century BC, you find expressions of genuine conscience. But those moral guidelines and those moral values that are reflected in Chinese philosophy and Chinese ethics of that era did not come from the kind of conscience that you call your conscience today. The conscience that was born out of Greek intellectualism, if you pardon the word, in the 5th century BC is, as I say, comparable to an app. So you have this faculty as a human animal called attention, the ability to pay attention. You're using it right now to pay attention to my words. You use it when you make toast in the morning. Use it when you dress. This faculty of attention is a multitasking tool. It's called rigpa in the jargon of the gnosis today. So your rigpa is your power of attention, which is applicable in many, many ways. Now just imagine that this tool of attention has an accessory. It has a special feature. It's like an attachment that you would add to a drill. For instance, I have a power drill and I put different types of drill bits in it, but I can also buy, for instance, a disc for sanding metal. And so when I put that attachment or accessory in the drill, it works in a specific way. Likewise, when conscience, syneidesis, is attached to your attention functions in a unique manner. So conscience depends on the ability to reflect upon yourself and upon your own actions in a completely exclusional and private way. No one else is involved in those reflections. The app of conscience only works for you. It operates, you operate it, it works for you, and it only works in relation to you until you decide to act on your conscience outwardly. So this internal self-reflective faculty of conscience can be called syneidic attention. That's an adjective I invented, syneidic, S-Y-N-E-D-I-C, and it is derived from the Greek root for the word conscience, syneidesis. So, syneidic attention is what you use, what you operate when you are reflecting or contemplating a choice based on your conscience. And when you don't use it, it's neuter, it's neutral, the switch is off. And for many people, the switch of conscience is permanently off. But one of the fascinating things about the way conscience works, and this is kind of an existential spin I'm putting on it here, is that you can't really say you have it unless you're using it. So when you use it, you use that app, then you are working conscience, you're using that tool, but when you're not using it, it's as if you don't have it at all. Can you see that? Sartre was someone who pointed out that particular odd feature of conscience in a number of his expositions. Although I think I do better at delineating it than Sartre did. Dare I say. There are a couple of other really intriguing features of conscience. I don't want to elaborate on them because I don't want to run on too long, but I will point out what I consider to be a really striking feature of conscience. You see, you know you have conscience when you engage that app. When you're actually using it, you know you have it. When you're not using it, it's as if it's not there. And another property of conscience is the less you use it, the less of it is there to be used. It's like a tool that atrophies if you don't use it and exercise it, like a limb that atrophies. So anyway, conscience, I don't want to say this in the passive voice. So anyway, as I said, the elimination of the humanities damages the faculty of conscience in everyone. You might recall that in Mythology 101, I pointed out that myth is racist. Why? Because all myths in the world come from particular races that lived at a particular time, in a particular land, and spoke a particular language. Nevertheless, the content of those myths, as they survive, the stories, the narratives, the characters, and the things that can be learned from the myths of different cultures, Aztec, Japanese, Persian, Polynesian, Siberian, are there for everyone to enjoy, for all races of the world to enjoy, even though they were race-specific in origin. The same is true of conscience. The specific origins of conscience are racial. It comes from the peak period of Greek philosophy and culture in the 5th century BC. But now that conscience has been installed, now that it is available for the human animal, it's there for everyone who chooses to recognize what it is and who wants to learn how to use it. And that's what the humanities teach. They teach how to use your conscience. Now, you already know how to use your conscience, don't you? I'm pretty certain that you do. So here the question is, just asking for a friend, do you want to know how to use it even better? That's what the study of humanities will give you. That's what it will teach you. So, in conclusion, I'll refer to Nematta. In a recent talk I gave on Nematta, I said that the purpose of Nematta, which is a modern mystery school, is to restore and regenerate the humanities. It should be added that the framework and groundwork for doing that is firmly based in the Gnostic practice and the Sophianic way of life. That's an innovation. That is a complete innovation in our time. To have a study of the humanities framed in that way is completely new and has never been done before. Although in the mysteries there was, as it were, a kind of preparation then for the mysteries today. So perhaps now you'll see why I consider it so important that I make that statement, that when you go to Nematta, what you see are courses in the humanities, and that's why you see them. Enough said, and I'll be seeing you in the beauty to come.